All right, I am here with Jan Arendtsz, CEO and founder of Celigo. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you on the show today. I would love to learn. Actually, the first question I kind of have is, what is IP as a server, or iPaaS? What do we even call it?
iPaaS. iPaaS for
Yeah.
short. So it stands for Integration Platform as a Service. As you can imagine, the term integration is used traditionally to connect various different disparate business applications together or data sources together. That's what gave birth to this notion of an integration platform. And of course, the PaaS part is it's all in the cloud, right? So but the industry has been around for a while. The predecessor was something called ETL, extract, transform, load. If you heard about companies
Yeah.
in the 90s and 2000s, such as Informatica, that was the predecessor.
All right, awesome. So, for my edification and for my audience out there, Celigo is an iPaaS, an integration platform as a service. And we've got the CEO and founder today, and we're going to learn about your harrowing journey to growing your business. So, I'd love to hear just a little bit about your background and really kind of what is your entrepreneurial journey and what led you to ultimately found the company.
Sure. So I suppose I started as someone who was technical. I have a computer science background. Spent about 2.5 years as an engineer, and it became fairly clear to me, maybe in the first year, if not 6 months, that this was not really my long-term calling. But look, I was young, and something internally, a little voice in my head said, stick it out for a little bit, because then you have this technical foundation that can be useful later on. So that's what I did. And then I moved into business consulting. I joined a company called Cambridge Technology Partners in the 90s, a pretty well-known firm. And that's where I really learned business, so to speak, and how technology can be used to solve business problems. So I did all of that. And then I had this itch which is hard to describe, but I felt like I needed to start something myself. And I think I was in my late 20s at that time, and I was serious about my career finally. And I started thinking about ideas, and they were all really terrible ideas. But that was always in the backdrop. I wanted to start something, and then finally circumstances led me to something that ultimately led to Celigo. And I'm happy to
Excellent.
expand on that.
So you got the itch. You were kind of coming up with ideas. How did you discover that this was the right one?
Yeah, it's hard to describe, but I was working at one of the first true Saas companies in the early 2000s, and that really shaped how I thought about the world. And there was that quintessential light bulb moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the future. SaaS is going to be the future. But I had no idea that it was going to be this popular and this successful. Mm-hmm. And in this company, I was responsible for managing some of the more technical integrations that this company needed with a number of other products. And in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, what about a cloud-based platform that can be used to connect these various different apps together? I had this idea, I think, as far back as, I'm going to say, 2004. And I filed it away. I quit that company and I started a consulting company and ran it for about 5 years. Got to about a scale of about 100 people. We did a lot of business process consulting, but we also did integration work to connect various different apps together. And then finally, I took that little idea in the back of my head and started Celigo, the SaaS company, in 2011.
Interesting. So by starting the service business, you really got to understand the customer and the problems that you were dealing with and the different technologies. Did that really help hone and kind of clarify that idea
100%, right?
Yeah.
Because as a consulting company, you don't need to go get funded per se, right? You can be profitable from an early stage. And so customers were paying us to solve some of their business problems. And some of those business problems happened to be around the future business that we were going to start, around connecting these various apps in the enterprise. And this was from like 2006 through to early 2011. So the SaaS space was changing pretty rapidly. There were lots of new applications coming in, but there were also lots of on-prem apps, and the world was little by little transforming to the cloud. So we really got to cut our teeth. And the core of me is I'm always a problem solver. I always want to understand what is the business problem that someone's trying to solve, and try to get as close to that as possible. And in running a consulting company, I had the opportunity to get really close to it, really understand it, so that then we could take a step back and think about how we would solve that.
Yeah.
It's a product company.
I love it. So I'm an executive coach, and I work with a lot of different types of founders. And one of the types of founders that tends to fail the most often or have the most struggles are just what I call the outsider. So they're a founder, maybe usually a serial founder, that has an idea to develop and market a product into a customer base that they don't really understand. And they end up falling on their face a whole bunch of different ways. And you know, it's amazing how many different ways you can fall on your face when you really don't understand the space that you're getting yourselves into. So when those kinds of founders come to me because their hair's on fire, I usually coach them some way to say, well, how do you become an insider? And providing services, becoming a service business first, is one of the most sort of tried and true ways to not only really get to understand the customers and their problems and all the different tools and technologies that they're using, but then also to be able to kind of eat your own dog food. You know, that's like obviously typical term for us SaaS founders, that we want to be able to eat our own dog food and really understand how the product works. What better way than to provide that to our customers and actually get paid to do it?
Paid for it.
Right?
Yes.
And so actually I have several clients, and some of whom I'm sure are listening today, that have actually gone out and started consulting firms or agencies because basically I coached them to realize that they just weren't ready to sell into this market yet. So I just love to hear that that approach, whether that was intentional or not, that approach.
It was not intentional. I'm not going to pretend that was the case, but
you had all the different ideas that maybe could possibly work, and it wasn't until you became that insider that one of them finally clicked.
Correct.
Yeah, that's amazing. So okay, so you started building out this platform. So tell me about what were some of your early struggles and growing pains and pivots around finding product market fit.
Yeah, so I think the journey can be broken down into a few different segments. So from 2011 through 2015, we were a bootstrapped SaaS company. And the only reason that we were bootstrapped, we didn't raise a seed round, was we were able to shut down our consulting business and be able to transition, morph into the SaaS company. So we were able to build a product fairly quickly. In fact, while we were shutting down the consulting company, so on and so forth. Anyhow, so long story short, what happened is somewhat ironic. So after all that practice in running a consulting company, as I said, getting close to the business problem, so on and so forth, we built a product which was not very good. And in the 2014-15 timeframe, we started discussing some of the deficiencies of this platform. And I think one thing that was really important was at this time, from 2011 to 2015, the world of SaaS was changing rapidly, right? There were tons more SaaS apps coming to the market. And the way customers were acquiring these SaaS applications were also pretty interesting, in that it was not necessarily going through central IT. If you had a credit card, you could go acquire an application. And the biggest problem we had with our existing product was it was too isolated. We couldn't let business users take part in building some of these workflows. It was a little bit too much of a black box for them. You had to be super technical. And we saw the industry changing. I was a big advocate that an iPaaS, an integration platform, has to straddle the line between the super technical users and what I used to call and still call a tech-savvy business user, the techno-business world. We have to be able to pivot between the two. Some use cases can only be done by a very sophisticated IT type user, but others at least can be started by a business user. And we felt like the existing product didn't really have the framework, the bones to be able to do that. So we made a very hard decision, which was, let's scrap it and let's build something from scratch. And I always say to this date, it's the single best business decision we made as a company, because it really set the stage for us to then build the right product. And to this date, I always tell anyone, employees, investors, external parties, that we have a phenomenal product. Our product is our biggest asset. So that was round one on product market, right? Didn't get it right and throw it down. Kind of like literally the worst case nightmare you can have.
Yeah. So I deal with that a lot. So product market fit is kind of a core focus area in my work, and it doesn't mean just being a startup. You can actually grow a pretty sizable business and either not really have product market fit or lose it as things in the market change. And so actually helping them deal with the sunk cost fallacy is a really big part, sort of foundational part of the coaching. Where I kind of just take it completely outside of the product that exists or the business that exists, and just sort of help them understand the sunk cost fallacy. And we go through some different exercises, and then kind of bring it back to say, well, what you really want to do here is solve a big problem, and what you really want to do here is get to a certain level of growth. And to do that, sometimes we have to burn the bridges or burn the ships and let go of that sort of sinking ship and swim to shore, or swim to a higher maximum. And that's something that's incredibly hard, even for small things like small features. Once we build it, we say, well, it's done, we got to move on to the next thing. It's like, well, wait a minute, if you didn't actually solve the problem, if it doesn't really click, it's not, the value isn't there. So you took that. I mean, obviously that was a really painful thing. So you started from scratch again. And did you have a specific focus on one or the other of these two personas?
So initially it was fairly front loaded towards the business user, I would say. But, and that's because we decided to focus. So we came out with a new platform in early 2016, and maybe for the first 12, 18 months, our focus was predominantly on what we call pre-built integration. So take, for example, a typical order to cash type business process. You're selling tangible goods, and you might be selling it online on marketplaces, and you want to be able to get those orders into, let's say, an ERP, an order management system, fairly typical use case. So we focused on pre-building a lot of that. so that it can be sold directly to a business user. They can go configure it. And we were very successful in doing that. While in the back end, we were building the platform features out to allow then any type of user, including that quintessential IT user, to come in and be able to build anything that they want. So that was a little bit of a hedge. Looking back in retrospect, maybe if I were to do it again, I might do things slightly differently, but that's the path we took. And I suppose the one other thing I would say is sometimes you become a victim of your own success. So you, in this particular example, we had these pre-built. They were so well done. They were like apps that someone could come in, can use to solve their business problem. But then word got around and we had plenty of business. And when you have plenty of business, your go-to-market goes towards that direction, even though you know that the future is a mix of being able to sell these pre-built ones and have customers build their own workflows. And so I think we took a hit for a while because we were successful. And it prevented us, ironically, from then focusing on solving some of the bigger problems.
So wait, so where was the success? Was it on the pre-built side or the?
So initially, a fair bit of the success was on the pre-built side.
Yeah.
Until we built out all the capabilities we thought we need to what we call custom build any type of workflow, and we expose it and then refine it, so on and so forth. So that took, I think, literally maybe until about 2019, 2020 for us to be able to get there. But certainly the pre-built integrations paid the bills. We were enormously successful with that, and still are.
Yeah. So that, I mean, personally, as a product designer, that's what I call kind of the theme park strategy, that you're sort of designing a bespoke workflow, which just tends to work better than these very open-ended, kind of give you enough rope to hang yourself kinds of solutions, until you get to some level of success where you can really invest in helping them and training them and giving them the tools to actually do something with it. That actually works out quite well. So a lot of companies that come to me that build the sandbox, they say, well, we have a couple of power users here who actually invested all the time and energy to figure out some way of making it successful. But for everybody else, it's too much work. It's too complicated. It's, they fall into too many traps. And so part of what I suggest is like, well, okay, take the thing that's working, take your power users, figure out what they're doing, turn that into a theme park ride, and then offer that to your customers as a pre-built workflow, a pre-built solution. And of course, you're filtering out obviously a wide set of potential customers, but for the ones that it is a good fit for, they get an incredible amount of leverage there. So actually going through and designing these specific workflows to figure out what really works then can help you hone in on your ideal customer. Then you say, all right, now who wants to lift up the hood and who wants to get in there and get their hands dirty? You're welcome to.
You're clearly a product guy because you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yes, one of the benefits, it's a nuanced conversation. One of the benefits was that we're building these workflows instead of our customers, and we're then shrink wrapping it. So we learned a ton in doing that, and these were not simple workflows. These were some of the most complex workflows that you can imagine, and we became power users of our own product. And so we then split the product team into by and large, the big part of the headcount was on the platform, but then we had a small team responsible for building these pre-built integrations, and they were literally customers of the platform, right? So that was pretty neat, and I think we learned a lot. Wow. Look, in hindsight, you can always look back and say, well, we could have made a pivot here, there, so on and so forth. But in the end, very pleased in terms of how things worked out. And we are finally, I should say, I think, reached the promised land in finding that right balance between the techno business world. And I'm super proud of this. Today, a user can come in, the most advanced IT user can come in, and they can either configure or look one level below, look under the hood and start writing code if they wanted to. That's the kind of flexibility we give them. And then certain types of business users who understand the use case, the business process, they can come in and start building flows as well. So we've reached that place. Not saying we're done, because now we're trying to make it easier and easier and easier for both personas. And that's what's exciting, especially with the advances in AI, so on and so forth. The way we think about usability is going to change dramatically.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so one more kind of analogy on there. I play video games, and there's been this sort of ongoing debate for more than a decade now about procedurally generated content, right? Or these sandbox kind of open world games, and whether or not they are better or worse than the written and designed and sort of, intentional games and stories that obviously go back to the beginning. And there's something to be said that, humans actually designing an experience, actually, taking your hand and guiding you through a process to get to the end with intention, ends up creating a better experience than simply throwing people in an open world. Now, of course, there are certain scenarios where people come up with some pretty ingenious stuff, and there are these moments of excitement, but that's not exactly what a game is. And of course, in the sense of business, yeah, you've got people that are willing to go out and put in the hard work and willing to figure things out on their own. But the vast majority of people are time starved, and they really just want an easy button. And so if you give them a big sandbox and a big toolkit to knock themselves out with, you're just drastically filtering on what kind of customers you can serve. So